Let's get started. We're on Daf Tes Zayin Amud Aleph. So I just want to clarify one point before we move on in our Gemara today. We talked about yesterday the prohibition of a Jew to sell a behema gasa, a large farm animal, to an akum, lest there come a situation where he leases or lends the animal to an akum, and the animal will do malacha on Shabbos. Rav Huna provided us with a huge chiddush yesterday. Rav Huna's chiddush was that you are allowed to sell the animal to an akum as long as he doesn't tell you explicitly that he plans to use it for farming, because you're allowed to assume he's going to use it for shechita, for slaughter, and therefore nothing bad will happen. People won't see this animal being used on Shabbos. Now, I just want to clarify that only works for animals that are generally used for meat, such as cows. But if you sell a donkey to an akum, then you can't make that assumption that he's going to slaughter that donkey and use it for its meat. Now, sometimes you can slaughter a donkey and use it to feed your animals with, but that's not a reasonable assumption. So Rashi points out that when it comes to donkeys, Rav Huna would agree that you can't sell it unless the guy tells you explicitly that he's not going to be working with it, but he's rather going to be slaughtering it or getting rid of it very, very shortly. And that will help us understand Rabbi Yehuda's shita, because Rabbi Yehuda, as we're going to see in just a moment, is of the opinion that he disagrees with the Tanakama. The Tanakama says you're not allowed to sell a behema gasa to an akum. So according to this, what we're saying now, even according to Rav Huna, that would include donkeys. You're not allowed to sell donkeys under most circumstances to an akum. Comes along Rabbi Yehuda and says, if it's a handicapped donkey, then you would be allowed to sell it. It's much more difficult to fit Rabbi Yehuda's shita in a case where, like Rav Huna said, where you're selling a cow. Because according to the Tanakama, you are allowed to sell a cow unless the guy tells you explicitly that he's going to be using it for farming. So there, in that situation, Rabbi Yehuda's dispute, Rabbi Yehuda's other opinion would not really make much sense. If he tells you explicitly he's going to use it for farming, then how could you sell him a handicapped cow? So therefore, you have to explain that Rabbi Yehuda's disagreement is mostly on cases like donkeys, where the animal is typically not used for meat. And there the Tanakama says, under most circumstances, you cannot sell it. Comes along Rabbi Yehuda and says, if it's handicapped, so it's indicated by itself that it's not going to be used for farming, then you're allowed to sell it. So that was where we're up to. So agolim v'sayachim, calves and donkeys are not allowed to be sold to an akum. So Tanya Rabbi Yehuda matir b'shvura mipnei she'ena yachola lihisrapos v'lichios. So Rabbi Yehuda says that a handicapped donkey can be sold, and the reason is because it's not going to heal, and it's not going to live long. It's either going to die of natural causes, or it's going to be used for, like they used to send the horses to the glue factory. I mean, what are you going to do with it? You can't do anything with it. So, Amru lo v'halo marvino leha v'yoledes, v'kiven de marvino leha v'yoledes, asi l'shahuya. So the rabbi's response to Rabbi Yehuda in this brisa is, 1 second, just because a donkey is handicapped doesn't mean that you're going to kill it right away. You could always use that animal for breeding. And therefore, if it's going to be kept for breeding, people will see this donkey that previously belonged to the Jew in the akum's possession, and they'll think that it's okay now to sell a behema gasa to an akum. So, Amr lahen l'chishatele. Rabbi Yehuda's response to them was, you know what? Send me a memo when that actually happens, that they use handicapped donkeys for breeding. You know why? Because alma lo mekabel zachar. What Rabbi Yehuda was essentially telling them is that that doesn't happen in animal, what is it called? In animal breeding. In other words, it doesn't happen in nature. A handicapped female will not allow a male to mount her, and I guess typically a male that's handicapped will not be able to mount the female. The point being is that it's just people don't do that. They don't breed handicapped animals. Next, ben beseira matir besus. The next line in the Mishnah was that ben beseira permits the sale of a horse. And the reason is simply because a horse, like the Brisa says, Tanya ben Beseira matir b'sus b'mteishu osabo malacha shein chayav oleachatas. He says, what's the worst that a guy will do with a horse? He's going to ride it. Riding a horse is not a malacha deoraisa. It's only an isser derabbanan. So the worst that people will see is the akum riding the horse, not schlepping, not being a beast of burden. And therefore, since there's no malacha being done with this animal, the whole concern of the chachamim, that a Jew's animal will be doing malacha on Shabbos, is not present. V'Rebbi osem mipnei beis devarim, echad mishum taras klei zayin, ve'echad mishum taras behema gas. But the Brisa now says that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi still disagrees, and he holds that even selling a horse is forbidden for two reasons. Number one, because of weaponry, and number two, because it still falls under the rubric of a behema gasa. So what does that mean? Bishlam ataras klei zayin ika dekatel bischufe. I understand the weaponry issue is because when you bring a horse into war, a horse can be used as a weapon. Sure. Just like we learned yesterday that you can't sell weapons to akums because they'll use it against Jews. You can't sell a horse, says Rabbi, because a horse's hooves are used in war to trample the enemy. Elatoras behema gasa mahi. But what is the second argument? That it still falls under the rubric of behema gasa. So Amar Rabbi Yochanan l'cheshiyazkin matchino berichayim b'Shabbos. So Rabbi Yochanan explains, even the most majestic steed, once it gets old, will be used to be tied to a millstone and to schlep the millstone. So eventually a horse will become a beast of burden. It may not happen right away, but eventually it'll happen. It's just like in the human species as well. When you're young, you can do anything. Once you get old, they tie you to a millstone and have you schlep, right? Okay. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, halacha keben beseira. So Rabbi Yochanan says the halacha is like ben beseira, that it's permitted to sell a horse. Ibaya lahu shorshel patamahu. Tiboy la Rabbi Yehuda, tiboy la Rabbana. So now an interesting question is raised. What about the ox or the bull of a fattener? So we're talking about steer, really. It's, those Kobe bulls that they raise in Japan? You know what I'm talking about? Kobe steak? Yeah. Kobe beef? Mm-hmm. What is Kobe beef? They basically fatten the animals and they lift them off their feet so that they don't develop strong muscles, so that the meat is fatty and very, very tender. It's terrible sometimes what they do to animals to please the consumer. But in any event, the question is, what if a bull is fattened for very, very fatty meat, and it really can't work now? It's got occluded arteries, and it's just so fat it can't do anything. It's just sitting there and doing nothing all day. So the question is, are you allowed to sell this to an akum? Now, this is a question both according to Rabbi Yehuda and according to the Rabbanan. And as we explained, Tiboy la Rabbi Yehuda, well, we'll see. Tiboy la Rabbi Yehuda ad kan lo kashoy Rabbi Yehuda ela bishvura de lo asi lichlal malacha. Aval hai dechimashi le asi lichlal malacha aser. The argument, like Shlomi just said, is that maybe it's like a handicapped animal that Rabbi Yehuda says you are allowed to sell. But on the other hand, maybe it's not, because a handicapped animal is permanently precluded from working. Mm-hmm. But you can take an obese ox and put it on a diet program with exercise, and it'll become fit again, and it'll be able to work. So maybe Rabbi Yehuda would say that's prohibited. O dilma afilu l'rabbanan lo ka'asri hasam ela destami lav l'shchita koy aval hai destami l'shchita koy afilu rabbanan shari. And it's a question according to the Chachamim as well. They say you can't even sell a handicapped behema gasa to an akum. But here it's still a question, because maybe only a handicapped animal can't be sold because it's not prima facie indicated that it's meant for shchita. But a bull that's been fattened specifically, we know why it's being fattened. It's not being fattened because we want to feed an obese ox. It's being fattened because to use for shchita, to use for tender, fatty meat. So maybe the Chachamim would agree that in this case, where it's clearly indicated by the cultivation of the animal that it's meant for food, that it would be permitted to sell to the akum. So Tashma, the Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Shel Beis Rabbi Hayu Makrivin Shor Shel Patam Biyom Edom. So listen to the following story. In Rabbi Yehuda Nasi's time, because he was the Nasi, he felt that he had to show in order to avoid animosity from the authorities, they had to offer a special gift on the holiday, every community of the secular within that secular area in Eretz Yisrael had to offer a gift on the holiday of the national government, whether it was the Persian rulers, whatever it was at the time, or the Romans.
Rabbi Yehuda was in Eretz Yisrael?
Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi was in Eretz Yisrael, absolutely. Every Nasi is in Eretz Yisrael. Anyone who's a Nasi is in Eretz Yisrael. So his community offered a fatted bull on their holiday. Now, of course, this is very unsavory to Rebbe because it's very problematic. So, Chiser Dalad Rivavan She'ein Makrivan Oso Hayom El Lamacher. He was able to contribute as bribery. He was able to contribute 4 myriads of dinars, which is a huge amount of money, in order for the government to allow them not to give it on that day, but on the following day. So it wouldn't coincide actually with their idolatrous holy day. And then Chisar Dalad Rivavan Shein Makrivan Oso Chaya L'Shachut. And then he contributed another 4 myriads of dinars in order to convince them that they could give the animal already slaughtered and not alive, to minimize the idolatry aspect. And then Chisar Dalad Rivavan Shein Makrivan Oso Kol Iker. And then he finally contributed another 4 myriads of cash in order to bribe the government to not require them to give an animal at all. So my timer, what's the reason why Rebbe was so determined to not give them the animal? Lav mishum dilma asi l'shahuye. It must be because he felt that it's usher even to give a fattened bull to give to an akum, because the akum might end up not shechting it and keeping it, and it's no different, therefore, from any other behema gasa. Doesn't that resolve our question? So the Gemara says no. V'li taimech she'ein makriven oso hayom elo l'machar my taima. He says, according to that, but according to the story, if Rebbe's whole concern was not giving them a behema gasa, what did he accomplish by paying a lot of money to have them delay it from Tuesday to Wednesday? In other words, what is accomplished? If that was his whole concern, then why did he pay so much money just to delay it giving it if he knew he was going to give it to them anyway?
He's just trying to avoid that day.
So
that
Ella, right, so therefore the conclusion that we have to reach is that Ella Rebbe miyaker milsa boy v'sova yi'akir v'asi porta porta. So the answer is that Rebbe's objection was to in any way participate or to have the appearance of participation in an idolatrous holiday. It's got nothing to do whether they're going to keep the behema gasa or not. So you can't prove from the story one way or the other. But he was trying to do it gradually. He knew that he couldn't bribe them not to take the animal at all in the first step. So he just basically, like when it comes to convincing the authorities to let the Jews get out of doing something idolatrous, you have to do it gradually. You can't go from A to Z in one fell swoop. So he did it gradually, and that's how he was able to get out of it. But it's got nothing to do with not giving them a behema gasa.
They obviously knew what he was trying to accomplish.
But they knew what he was trying to accomplish. But that's not the issue. The issue is, can you infer from this story that it's usher to give a fatted bull to an akum? And the Gemara's conclusion is you can't infer anything.
Remember Moshe, when he first spoke to Paro, he said, "Look, we want to go for 3 days."
Right.
Same Indian, right?
It seems to be the same principle.
Yeah.
So now the Gemara says, let's go back to something that you said before. B'chimashi leibari v'vid malacha? Question mark. He says, is it really possible to rehabilitate a fatted ox so that it can become a work animal again? I mean, wouldn't you think that once it's been so obese and so sedentary, it's not going to be able to work anymore, no matter how much you slim it down? So Amar Rav Ashi, Amar li Zvida, Bartura Mashinon Leiva Avid Al Chad Train. So Rav Ashi said that Zvida, the bull fattener, once told me that if you take a fattened bull, and you slim it down and you exercise it, it can actually accomplish twice as much work as a regular bull that was never fattened in the first place. So I'm wondering if that applies to humans as well. I'm just thinking that maybe it's because, they have all this fatty tissue. If you convert it to muscle, then maybe it's a bulkier animal and it can accomplish more that way, as long as it's healthy and becomes more muscular than fatty. I don't know. But they do tell bodybuilders you got to eat a lot, and you just convert all of that protein.
Protein, not fat.
But you convert all of that protein into muscle tissue, right? So maybe that's what happens. Is that maybe I don't know. Anyway, next Mishnah: Ein mochrin lahen dovin va'arayos v'chol davar sheyesh bo nezek l'rabin. Similar to what we learned yesterday by not selling them weaponry, You also cannot sell them animals that are wild and could be a hazard to the public, such as bears and lions. Because typically they would use these. I mean, we know certainly the Romans used to have in the Colosseums, they used to feed Jews to the lions. So you certainly can't sell them. That would make sense why this is part of the prohibition. Ein bonen imahim.
Yeah, Israel in those days had bears and lions.
Yeah.
They don't have bears and lions anymore.
That's right.
It's interesting.
Ein bonen imahim basiliki gardom itztadaya ubima. You're not allowed to, if you're a builder, you're not allowed to participate in the construction projects where they build basilici. A basilica is a tall building with usually a dome on it.
Yeah.
A gardom is a courthouse where they would sentence and convict criminals. And Itztadaya is a stadium. It even sounds like the word stadium, Itztadaya, right, where they would have bullfights and stuff like that. And Ubima, Rashi says, is an altar that was placed in the shrines of idolatry, but was not used for the actual idolatrous service itself, but sort of a preparatory idolatrous stage, like the offering of incense or something like that. Avol bonen imahem bimosios ubeis merchatzos. I'm sorry, the word bima, I made a mistake, I mistranslated. Bima also is a tower where they would throw people off the tower when they would execute them. That you're not allowed to build. But what you are allowed to build with them is bimosios. That's the altar that I was referring to, because it's not specifically for the idolatry. It's what's called, what Rashi says is the tashmish for avodas kochavim. It's a sort of an indirect usage in the shrine, but not used directly for avodah zara. Ubeis merchatzos. And when it comes to bathhouses, you're allowed to participate in the construction project. However, higia lakipa shemamida b'avodas kochavim also livnos. Typically, once they get to the end of one end of the bathhouse, they would install a statue of Aphrodite, who was the goddess of beauty. And they would put a statue in the bathhouse sort of as a good luck charm, so that every zhlub would start to look beautiful in the bathhouse, right? So you can't participate in the construction of the Aphrodite statue or the foundation of that area, because that's avodah zara as well. So the Gemara now says, Amar Rav Chanan bar Rav Chisda, Amar Amar Rav Chanan bar Rava, Amar Rav, Chaya gasa harehi ki behema daka lepirchus avalo lemechira, va'ani omer af lemechira, malkam shenagu limkar mochrin shalimkar ein mochrin. So the statement of Rav Chanan or Rav Chanan is as follows in the name of Rav. What is a chaya gasa? It's a large, undomesticated wild animal. It has the same halachic status in the laws of shchita as a behema daka, which is like a sheep or a goat. Now, what's the halacha? It's as far as pirchus. Now, the word pirchus means that when an animal is freshly slaughtered, because of its neurology, it's going to be flaying after the slaughter. If an animal is sickly before it's slaughtered, then its flaying will be limited because of its sickly condition. Just because an animal is sickly doesn't mean you're not allowed to shecht it. It could still be kosher. But the criterion to determine its level of sickliness is based on how its neurons fire upon shechita. If it is healthy enough so that when you shecht it, it flays back and forth, so then even though it was sickly, it's still a kosher animal. But if it was so sickly that when you shecht it, it just sticks out its leg and then doesn't move anymore, so then it's not kosher, because it's presumed to have been in a stage of death even before the shechita. And so what Rav is essentially saying over here is that if you shecht a chaya gasa, let's say a deer, right, which is venison, right, a large a chaya, and you want to know whether it's kosher because it was sickly, use the same test that you do for a sheep or a goat. That's what he says. But when it comes to selling a chaya, gasa, a large chaya, so then it does not have the same halachic status as a behema daka, because a behema daka you're allowed to sell to an akum, right, based on the minhag hamakom. But he says, Rav, that you're not allowed to sell a chaya gasa. But I personally, says Rav Chanan says, I say that, not like my Rebbe, I hold that you can even sell it just like you would sell a behema daka. So I hold, says Rav Chanan, that a chaya gasa has the same halachic status as a behema daka, and it all depends on the minhag hamakom. If the minhag of the place is that you're allowed to sell it, so then by all means you're allowed to sell a chaya gasa as well. Now this is problematic based on our Mishnah. Tanan. The Mishnah said, Ein mochrin lahem dovin va'aroyas v'lo kol davar sheyesh bo nezek l'rabim. The Mishnah had said that you're not allowed to sell lions and tigers and any hazardous animal. Taima de'ispe nezek l'rabim, halespe nezek l'rabim shari. But the inference is, it's only usher to sell because it presents a public hazard. But if an animal is tamed, for example, like a tamed lion, it sounds like you would be allowed to sell it. So isn't this a problem? Because according to the opinion that says that you're not allowed to sell a chaya gasa to an akum, so Amar Rabba Bar Ula ba'ari shavur va'aliba de Rabbi Yehuda. So the Gemara answers, when our Mishnah says that it's not a hazardous animal, it's only permitting us to sell a handicapped lion, not a tamed lion. In other words, it could be taka that you cannot sell any lion or any chaya gasa to an akum, but why did it only aser an animal that's hazardous to the exclusion of a handicapped lion? That's like Rashi explains, deshari te kavase bebehema gasa, right? But that it's permitted, just like you're allowed to sell a behema gasa that's handicapped, you're also allowed to sell a handicapped lion. And according to Tosfos, that's even according to the Chachamim, you'd be allowed to sell a handicapped lion. But a tamed lion, we're not suggesting, right? So therefore, it's not necessarily a kasha on Rav. Now, Ravashi Omar Stam Ari Shavur Hu Eitz Malacha. And Ravashi just adds and he says, don't think that our Mishnah is only permitting you to sell a handicapped lion. Our Mishnah is taka permitting you to sell any lion as long as it's tamed that does not present a public hazard. And the way that Ravashi looks at it is that what's the whole reason why you're not allowed to sell a behema gasa to an akum? Because the guy's going to keep it for work. And since it could potentially work on Shabbos. But since certain animals don't work, no matter how much you domesticate a lion, it's never going to schlep a plow. It's never going to carry things on its back. It's a feline. It's too proud. So therefore, you don't have to worry that the animal is going to do any malacha on Shabbos. And therefore, any tamed lion is permitted. And therefore, it's not a kasha on Rav. When Rav said that you're not allowed to sell a chaya gasa to an akum, he was referring to a type of chaya gasa that actually can do work, because it's no different from a behema gasa.
Like a buffalo, it says.
Well, we'll see. Actually, it says buffalo. Well, we'll see. Rashi calls it a wild donkey, like a wild ass, right? So I'm not. It could be there's different ways of. I don't think they had buffaloes in the Middle East anyway. But in any event,
Maybe a water buffalo.
a water buffalo.
African buffaloes.
Okay, maybe.
1.5.
Maybe. Okay, so meisve. So the Gemara says, let's raise it could also be like elephants also. Who knows? Meisve,
Oh, it has
kishem.
to be kosher.
No.
Buffaloes are kosher, aren't they?
No. Yeah, but we're not talking about kasher. We're talking about doing malacha on Shabbos.
Okay,
That's the
right.
issue. Yeah. So meisve. Kishem she'ein mochin lahem behema gasa, kach ein mochin lahem chaya gasa, va'afilu b'makom shemochin lahem behema daka, chaya gasa ein mochin lahem. But now look at a brisa. This brisa conclusively proves Rab's point that you're not allowed to sell a chaya gasa to an akum, because it says explicitly there's no difference between a chaya gasa and a behema gasa. Both of them are usher to sell. Even if the minhag hamakom is to sell a behema daka, you cannot sell a chaya gasa. Tiyufta de Rav Chanan bar Rava, tiyufta. Is this a refutation of Rav Chanan bar Rava? Yes, absolutely, it is. And therefore that position is no longer tenable. So Ravina Rame Masnisan Abraisu Mishani. Ravina has a slightly different way of presenting this back and forth by presenting a contradiction between our Mishnah and the brisa that we just quoted, and he reconciles it in the end. So Tanan, Ein Mochin Len Doven Vairos V'lo Kol Davar Sheish Bo Nezek L'Rabim, like he quotes our Mishnah, it says you're not allowed to sell any lion or tiger, lion or bear that's going to present a hazard to the public. So taima de isbei nesek halesbei nesek mochrin. So the implication is that as long as the animal is not dangerous, you're allowed to sell it, even though it's a chaya gasa. Or aminu kishem she'in mochen behema gasa kachin mochen chaya gasa afilu b'makom shemochen behema daka chaya gasa ein mochrin. And the Bryce that we just quoted said that you cannot sell a chaya gasa no matter how tame it is. So umeshani ba'ari shavur v'aliba de Rabbi Yehuda and Rav Ashi omer stam ari shavar who ate malacha. And he reconciles it by saying that the Mishnah is not permitting every chaya gasa. It's only permitting a chaya gasa that can't work, such as a handicapped lion. And Rav Ashi says every lion is handicapped vis-a-vis work. And therefore you can sell a lion as long as it's not dangerous, you can sell it. And other animals, as long as they don't work, you're allowed to sell them. But the brisa that says you cannot sell a chaya gasa is referring to chayas that can be put to work and become beasts of burden. So Maskeflo Rav Nachman. So Rav Nachman asks a question on all of the aforementioned, and he says, Man leimalan da'ari chaya gasahi, dilma chaya dakahi. So Rav Nachman challenges, he says, I don't understand why you're raising this as a contradiction. Who's to say that a lion counts as a chaya gasa? Maybe the very simple way to reconcile it is to say, the brisa prohibits selling a chaya gasa, maybe it's a buffalo, maybe it's an elephant. Right? But a lion is not a chaya gasa at all. It's a chaya daka. It's considered to be of the smaller type of animal, in which case the Mishnah would permit its sale as long as it's not dangerous. So the Gemara now says, and it's not clear whether at this stage we're going to try and answer Rav Nachman's question, but I believe that you'll see from the way that Rav Ashi presents it that he's addressing Rav Nachman's question. Rav Ashi diek mi masnisin umosiv tiyuvta. Rav Ashi presents the whole presentation slightly differently, and he says, take a look at the language of our Mishnah, and by the way, once we're finished with Rav Ashi, we'll see that Rav Nachman's argument does not hold water either. He says, look, Tanan ein mochin lahem dovim v'aroyas v'lo kol davar sheyesh bo nezek l'rabim. You may not sell any wild animal, such as a bear or a lion, that presents a hazard to the public. It sounds like from our Mishnah that you can sell any animal that does not present a hazard to the public. And that sort of shoots out Rav Nachman's thesis. Because our Mishnah is not only permitting you to sell lions, it's permitting you to sell any animal as long as it's not dangerous, including a chaya gasa. And v'taima ari d'stam ari shaver who eats the malacha. But it's only permitting you to sell those kinds of animals that are like a lion, in the sense that they don't work. Avol midi achrina David malacha lo. But any animal that does do work, you may not sell. Tiyufta de Rav Chanan bar Rava tiyufta. So this again, just from the Mishnah itself, without even having to present the brisa, presents a tiyufta on Rav Chanan, and therefore we side with Rav that it's not permitted to sell a chaya gasa to an akum. Now,
A lion, yes.
a lion you could, but why? Not because
Because
he doesn't work. Not because it's a chaya daka, but rather because even if it's a chaya gasa, it doesn't work.
And the bear the same, I guess.
Bear is the same. You can't put a bear to work unless he works in a circus, I guess. I'm not sure. Anyway, v'chaya gasa mihas maimalacha avda. So the Gemara says, what kind of chaya that's a large chaya can possibly be put to work? So Amar Abaya, Amar Limar Yehuda, Deveimar Yuchni Tachani Rechayim Ba'arodi. They take these wild donkeys. I don't know what you call them. I don't know if they have a special name, donkeys of the wild. And they put them to work by tying them to a millstone, and you can actually get it to schlep for you. Amar Reb Zera, Ki Havinan Be Rav Yehuda, Amar Lan, Gemiru Minoi Hamilsa, Demigavar Rabba Shamiali, Velo Yadana Ime Ravu Imishmol. So Reb Zera now relates the following story. He says, as we'll see, Reb Zera did a lot of traveling. He says, when I was by the base medrash of Rav Yehuda, he told us, accept the following words that I heard from a great man, and I don't remember whether that great man was Rav or Shmuel, but accept it anyway. And the words are, Chayagasa hareki behemadaka lefirchus. That as far as the laws of Shechita, like we learned before, a Chayagasa, let's say like a large deer or a buffalo, has the same status as a behemadaka as far as gauging its amount of flaying at the time of Shechita to determine whether the animal is kosher or not. Ki asoy lekurkunya ashkachti l'Rav Chia bar Ashi deyasu v'kamer mishmei de Shmuel chayagasa hareki behemadaka lepirchus. When I got to the town of Kurkunya, I found Rav Chia teaching this halacha, the same halacha, in the name of Shmuel. So Amina Shma Mina Mishmeidu Shmuel Itmar. So I said, aha, even though Rav Yehuda wasn't sure whether he heard it from Rav or Shmuel, now that I've heard it quoted in the name of Shmuel, I know that Shmuel taught it. Ki asoy l'sura ashkachti l'Rabba bar Yirmiyah deyasu v'kamer le'mishmei derav chayagasa reiki behemadaka l'pirchus. But then I went to the town of Sura, and I found Rabbi bar Yirmiyah teaching that same halacha in the name of Rav. So Amina Shma Mina Itmar Mishmei derav ve'itmar Mishmei Shmuel. So then I said to myself, now I understand why Rav Yehuda was confused, because it was taught by both of his Rebbeim.
Is that possible?
Sure, they could have just given it. Yeah, sure.
They agree sometimes.
Most of the time they agree.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. They agree that Torah is Misinai. They agree that Shabbos is the seventh day of the week. They agree on a lot of things, right? So Kisalikas lahasam ashkachti l'Ravasi diyasu v'ka'amar amar Rav Chama bar Gurya mishmei derav chaya gasa hariki behemadaka l'pirchus. Then I came to Eretz Yisrael, and I found Rav Asi teaching Shir, but he doesn't quote Rav as saying that halacha, but he quotes Rav Chama bar Gurya, who's a direct Talmud of Rav, quoting his Rebbe Rav as saying that the same criteria that applies to sheep applies to Chaya Gasa as far as Shechita. So Amri Lei v'lo Savra Lamar Deman Mora Dishmaitza Rabba bar Yirmiyah. So I said to Rav Asi, I heard it from Rabba bar Yirmiyah in the name of Rav. So shouldn't you quote in the name of Rabba bar Yirmiyah and not in the name of Rav Chama bar Gurya quoting Rav? So Amar Lei Patya Uchma Minoi Uminach Tistayim Shmaita. So Rav Asi turned to me Rav Zera, and he said, "You black tea kettle." What was he? That's actually a compliment, believe it or not. To call someone a black tea kettle is to imply that they're used quite frequently. In other words, you are a very seasoned veteran of Talmud Torah. And as a result, you are able to cite many, many citations. And therefore, based on your knowledge, encyclopedic knowledge, and based on my knowledge, we can figure out what happened. That really what happened was, Rav Chama bar Gurya was a direct student of Rav, and he quoted his Rebbe. Rabbi bar Yirmiyah heard it from Rav Chama bar Gurya. So it's Rabbi bar Yirmiyah in the name of Rav Chama bar Gurya in the name of Rav. It's Marnami, Amar Rav Zera, Amar Rav Asi, Amar Rabbi bar Yirmiyah, Amar Rav Chama bar Gurya, Amar Rav, Chayagasa, Ariki Behemadaka Lepircha. So in the final analysis, Rav Zera, towards the end of his life, was quoting Rav Asi, who he went to visit in Eretz Yisrael, who said in the name of Rabbi bar Yirmiyah, who said in the name of Rav Chama bar Gurya, who said in the name of Rav, that a Chaya Gasa has the same status as a Behemadaka for flaying at the time of Shechita.
So it's not Shmuel.
No, it could also be Shmuel, but this traces it back most accurately to Rav. Now, Ein Bon and Chule. Let's go now to our prohibited construction projects. Amar Rabba bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yechanan, Gimel Basilika Osein. There are 3 types of basilicas: Shel Malchei Ovdei Kochavim, V'Shel Merchatzaos, V'Shel Otzaros. One is for kings who are idolatrous, and one is for bathhouses, and one is for warehouses. Omar Rava Beis Laheter Ve'echel Isser. Only one of them is prohibited to participate in their construction projects because it could be used for causing harm, for convicting criminals and executing them.
Aren't they allowed to have capital punishment in the goyim when they have
What's
their
that?
courts? Can't a goyish court mete out capital punishment to their people?
Yes, they can, but
what's the problem?
Jews are going to be executed, and sometimes they're going to be executed unfairly because their system of justice is discriminatory against Jews. They'll kill Jews for practicing Judaism. So you don't want to be an abettor to that. V'simin leser malcheim bezikim. And the way to remember which basilica you can't participate in is based on the pasuk of to bind their kings with ropes, which could also be translated as to prohibit their kings in their basilicas. V'ika da amri, others learn that Amar Rava kulam leheter, that all 3 basilicas you're allowed to build with them. One second, v'hatnan ein bonin imohim basiliki. Didn't we just learn in the Mishnah that you can't build basilicas for them? So what if all 3 are permitted, which basilica is prohibited? So gardom itztadaya ubima, all of these things are prohibited, including a basilica. So ema shel gardom v'shel itztadaya v'shel bima. So the answer is that the Mishnah is only prohibiting the building of a structure, a basilica structure, if it's used for a gardom, a court of law, and itztadaya, a stadium, or a bima, which is where they would throw people off a building. But if the basilica is being built simply for the king, for his palace, then it's perfectly okay.
I thought we learned a few minutes ago that above the Aphrodite, they would put a basilica.
No, we'd learned that they would create a statue of Aphrodite, and you cannot participate in that construction project at that end of the bathhouse.
Basilica's a dome.
It's a dome structure.
I read earlier that you can't put a dome on top of the Aphrodite either.
Okay, so you'll have to, that's not in the Gemara though. Tanu Rabban. Kishenitfas Rabbi Eliezer Laminus Ha'eleu Legardom Lidon. So now we get an interesting story with which we'll conclude today's Gemara. When Rabbi Eliezer was once arrested for heresy, for high treason against the government, which involved heresy against the belief system of the government, of whatever the government's belief was at the time. So they bring him to the Gardom, to the courthouse, to be judged. Amar lo oso hegmon zaken shekamoscha yasok bidvarim betelim halalu. So the judge, or the ruler, the presiding judge, says to him, an elderly man such as yourself should engage in such foolish things, referring to his Jewish practices. So Amar lo neman alai hadaya. Rabbi Eliezer's response was, your honor is trustworthy to me. I trust your honor. Now, Kesaver oso hegmon alavu omer, v'hu lo omer ela keneged aviv shabash shamayim. So that hegmon, that judge, presiding judge, thought that Rabbi Eliezer was acknowledging his statement that you're engaging in folly. But when Rabbi Eliezer said your honor, he was referring to the honor in heaven, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not the judge standing in front of him. And that's how he's able to get out of it, because Amar lohol ve'emantani alecha dimos paterata. He says, since you placed my authority, you accepted my authority, I declare by Demos, the God, that you are hereby free to go. So, so Rabbi Eliezer was quite distraught. Number one, he was distraught because why was he, out of all of the other sages, arrested? Like, obviously, this was a sign to him from heaven that God was displeased with him in some way. And also that he had to only get out of it by using some kind of deceit in order to be able to save his life. It was very, very troubling to him. His students tried to console him, but he wouldn't be consoled.
I have a patient named Demos. He's Greek.
Really? Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. Amrlo Rebbe Akiva, Rebbe Tarshini Lomar Davar Echad Mimashali Madatani.
Reminds you of that story when the guy...
One second, let me just finish the story, please. Rebbe Akiva says to him, Rebbe, please allow me to repeat something that you once taught us. So Amar Lo, Emor. So Rebbe Eliezer said, go right ahead. Amar Lo, Rebbe Shema Minos Baliyadcha Vahana Echa Va'alav Nitfasta. He says, Rebbe, is it possible that the reason why Hashem was displeased with you is because at one time in your life you heard something from a heretic that pleased you and you didn't protest? And maybe that's the reason why God has compensated you in a negative way by causing you to be arrested for heresy. Amar lo, Akiva his kartani. So he said, Akiva, you reminded me. In other words, this was the words of consolation, that God is just and God did it for this reason. So, Pam echa sayisi mahalech b'shuka elyon shel tzipori, umatzasi echad mitalmidei Yeshu. The censor takes out those words. I once encountered a man in the upper marketplace of Tzipori, and he was one of the students, one of the apostles of Jesus. The Yaakov ish kfar Schanya shmo. His name was Jacob, the man of Schanya. Amar li kosuv b'toraschem lo savi esnan zoyna v'goymer. So he said to me, Rabbi, let me ask you a question. It's written in your Torah that you're not allowed to take a prostitute's wages and use that animal that was paid to a prostitute and bring it as a korban. Mahu laso semenu beisakise lekohen gadol. My question to you is, can you use it for some holy purpose, but it's still a lowly a lowly objective, like to make a bathroom for the Kohen Gadol on the Temple Mount when he has to relieve himself in the middle of his avodah. Would that be permitted? Now Tosfos points out that certainly permitted midioraisa, because the Torah only prohibits bringing this animal as a korban, not to convert it into cash and to use it for anything else on the Temple Mount. But is it perhaps rabbinically prohibited? That's what he was asking him. Velo amarti lo klum. And I didn't respond to the guy, either because I didn't have an answer or I didn't want to talk to him. So Amar li kach limadani Yeshu hanotzri. And he said to me, Rabbi Eliezer, so was I taught by Jesus the Nazarene. Ki me esnan zona kavtza ve'ad esnan zona yashuvu. So he quotes kibitza, that he quotes a pasuk from the book of Micha, which says that Jerusalem is going to be punished because it accumulated its wealth through taking prostitutes' wages, and through a prostitute's wages it will return to its depraved state. And what he was basically saying from that pasuk, you can infer mimakom hatinofes ba'u lamakom hatinofes yelechu. If they come from a place of filth, they should go back to a place of filth. Meaning that just as a prostitute's wages is something debased, you can invest that debased product into something also that's debased, like going to the bathroom. And therefore, that's what Yashka, my Rebbe, taught me. And the Hana'ani Hadavar. And when Rabbi Eliezer says, when I heard this, it was pleasing to me. It was a good vort. Even though it was said by Yashka, he said a good Dvar Torah. Al yedei zeh nitfasti leminos v'avarti al mashakasu b'Torah achek me'aleha darkecha. He says, and it's because of that I must have been arrested for heresy, because I violated the principle in the book of Mishlei, which says, distance her from yourself, from your pathway. Zu minus, this refers to heresy. Distance any type of heresy from you. Va'al tikrav al pesach beisa zu arshus, and do not come close to her house. This refers to not getting too close with the government. V'ika da'amri, others learn, hachek me'aleha darkecha zu minus, v'harishus. And some learn that the first part of the pasuk refers to both heresy and government. Ve'al tikrav al pesach beisa zu zona. And do not come close to the house, to her house, refers to not passing by in the proximity of where a prostitute hangs out. V'kama, or a brothel. And v'kama, and how much must you distance yourself from a brothel? Amar of Chisda arba amos, at least 4 cubits. So just make sure you don't walk down certain streets when you go to, where is that?
Amsterdam.